Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the FT's Whitehall editor, Sebastian Payne, and the political editor for Wales Online, Ruth Mosalski. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages. The Metro pictures an Afghan mother handing her young daughter to Taliban soldiers, hoping she might be saved by being put on a flight out of the country. The Telegraph leads with US President Joe Biden insisting that other countries critical of his decision to pull American troops from Afghanistan do have the option of leaving theirs in place. The Guardian hears the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab allegedly refused to take calls about the crisis in Afghanistan while he was on holiday. The Times says 3 of Britain's most senior civil servants, whose departments are responsible for the UK's evacuation programme in Afghanistan, are on holiday. The Daily Star quotes Manchester United legend Denis Law, who's vowing to tackle dementia after revealing his diagnosis. The Mirror carries a pledge from the terminally ill father of Sir Stuart Lubbock, who was found dead in TV presenter Michael Barrymore's swimming pool, to continue seeking justice for his son. The Financial Times says car maker Toyota is planning to cut production by 40% amid a resurgence of COVID-19, fueling fears about the global economic recovery. And we're joined tonight by Sebastian Payne and Ruth Mosalski. Thank you both very much for joining us this evening. Good evening to you. Let's start, Sebastian, with The Telegraph. And this is Joe Biden hitting back at Britain and giving a pretty different version of events to that we've heard from the Prime Minister yesterday in the House of Commons, but also from the Secretary-General of NATO, that NATO forces couldn't go it alone. He says that they can.
So this is a rather curious turn of development in the Afghanistan story, particularly with regards to UK-EU relations, that Boris Johnson, his government, have made it very clear they did not want to withdraw from Afghanistan. And as we report in the FT tomorrow, there were many conversations had about continuing UK troop presence, about continuing diplomatic presence, but ultimately Johnson decided that with the US pulling out, there was not much they could do. This interview given by Joe Biden, which was on Good Morning America and was not actually broadcast, but the Telegraph have got their hands on some of the quotes, actually says that Joe Biden said that, he met with all the NATO allies. They all agreed that we could leave. And he also said that, look, one thing I promise you in private, NATO allies are not quiet. And he also said that they could have stayed if they wanted to, and they didn't. Now, that's a very different spin on things, because everything we've heard over the last week has been the UK saying this is all America's fault. They're the reason we had to withdraw so quickly. I mean, we would have done things very differently ourselves. And you saw a lot of that in the House of Commons on Wednesday, when MPs were attacking Joe Biden, saying that this is, again, all America's fault. Now, I'm sure there'll be another round of tit for tat for this, but the key foreign policy element of this is the UK is very reliant on America. And I think realistically, the people I've spoken to in Whitehall and in the defence establishment, they don't think there was a realistic way the UK could have held a serious presence in Kabul without America. Because for one thing, the airport is being secured by thousands of American troops. When they go, who's going to secure the airport? That would need a major commitment from other NATO members, the kind of which is just really unrealistic. So it will be interesting to see how these comments are responded to, because they just don't tally with anything we've heard from the other leaders.
Yeah, and Ruth, given what we heard in the House of Commons yesterday, given what Joe Biden has said, what does this tell us about the state of the special relationship?
It throws it open, doesn't it? Because we've had, I think a lot of people were obviously relieved it was Joe Biden rather than Donald Trump. But there's been conversation that this is just a continuation of Trump's policy from this side of the Atlantic. And one of your commentators earlier in the evening was saying that they can completely understand that, and they're very upset and concerned that that's the way that it's being seen. But you can't really deny that it is. Biden was very clear during his election campaign. This is what he wanted to do. He stuck to that. There's some rumours now he might keep a larger number of troops in Afghanistan for longer if the situation continues. But you know that Boris Johnson's probably sat there tonight seeing these comments and asking some serious questions of that supposed special relationship. Although we were told during the summit over the summer that that's a term that they no longer wish to use quite so openly.
No, indeed. Let's turn to The Guardian now, Sebastian. Increasing pressure on Dominic Raab. Insisted today he wasn't going to resign. What's The Guardian's take on this?
So this is a report that came out in the Daily Mail yesterday that said that Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, was advised by his officials to make a call to his equivalent in then Afghanistan government. Raab was away, didn't make that call allegedly, and it was given to his junior minister, Lord Zach Goldsmith. And in response to that, his equivalent in Afghanistan didn't want to take the call, seeing it was someone too junior. The Foreign Office hasn't disputed that this happened. They've said that Mr. Raab was always engaged and was very much following what was going on. But there's a lot of a row going on at the moment about the fact that he was on holiday, and there's reports in other papers that he was on holiday nearly all of last week, including some details in the Telegraph about exactly how much time he allegedly spent on a beach, while many purporting to be fully in touch on this. Labour, the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, they've all called on Mr. Raab to resign. I don't get the sense that he will, because I think fundamentally that, Boris Johnson was also briefly on holiday for one day. And there's just a sense that the whole government let the ball drop on this, not just the Foreign Office and not just the Foreign Secretary. But Mr. Raab has been under fire all of today. He said he's not resigning. Downing Street says the Prime Minister still has full confidence in him. So I imagine it's not going to fundamentally affect things now. When we do come to that government reshuffle, which has been in the planning for weeks and months, it will be interesting to see if Mr. Raab does keep his job at that particular point.
Yeah, and we have heard repeatedly, Ruth, this week, haven't we, that government ministers are entitled to take a holiday during recess. Everybody needs to take a holiday. But the former UK ambassador to the US, Lord Kim Darroch, was speaking earlier today, and he said that it's very rare for officials to recommend ministers make calls while on holiday, and that the Foreign Secretary should have recognised this, and he should have done it. What does this tell us about him, and how difficult is it for him?
I think Seb's right. It felt a little bit this morning like there was more calls that Raab may go. That seems to be going away now, and I think we only need to look at Boris Johnson's record with his cabinet. Priti Patel didn't lose her job. Robert Jenrick didn't lose his job. He's not in the habit of sacking his members of his cabinet. I think there's a really telling line here in this Guardian piece, which is that Raab's team had told civil servants, quote, "There was an incredibly high bar to get him to look at anything while on holiday." And while, yeah, you're right, everyone deserves a holiday and everyone needs a holiday, and I'm sure that's not particularly true for cabinet ministers, especially after last year. You do wonder what that incredibly high bar is, that if he didn't think that this call was what met that test. The fact that his equivalent didn't take the call at such a crucial time. We all work in companies. We can all imagine that boss being on holiday, and what do you do? But it's such a different game in politics, isn't it? And there are thousands and thousands of people's lives on the line here. And that Labour line, I think yesterday from the Commons, from Keir Starmer, about surely you could have picked up the phone. I'd get off a sun lounger effectively to make that phone call. It's going to ring true with lots of people. You only need to look at any of the horrific pictures on the front of any of the papers tomorrow to think, well, surely he could have made that call.
Yeah, and in terms of those phone calls as well, we saw the images of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the phone to President Biden. But even that telephone call, Sebastian, took quite some time, given the seriousness of the situation.
That is true, although people in the UK government can obviously point out that Boris Johnson got the first call after Joe Biden became president. He got the first call after the fall of Kabul, and Joe Biden obviously has himself shown his personal investment within the so-called special relationship. When he made his visit to the UK, he saw the Queen and has acknowledged the importance for that, as the UK is the most central ally to the US there. I think the fact is Joe Biden has really got himself into a very hardline position on this, that he's been a long-term supporter of withdrawing all troops from Afghanistan, not just over the past week, but going back to when he was vice president under Barack Obama. And there's been a lot of reporting out of America that really speaks to the fact that nothing could have persuaded him. So I think, there's obviously been some distance there between Boris Johnson and President Biden, and there will be some awkwardness. But ultimately, the UK-US relationship, it's about values, it's about intelligence sharing, it's about a worldview. It always goes beyond individuals. And I think you can barely name a single UK Prime Minister who's not fallen out with the US president. So that's just another one of these particular moments. But there is no doubt things are pretty awkward between London and Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah, let's turn to the Times now, Ruth. And not just Boris Johnson, Joe Biden and Dominic Raab on holiday. Britain's most senior civil servants in key departments also away as this situation grew more and more serious.
Yes, the Times is reporting tomorrow that Philip Barton, Matthew Rycroft and David Williams, who are permanent secretaries at the Foreign Office, Home Secretary and Ministry of Defence, are also all on leave. It's a natural follow, isn't it, to the Dominic Raab question, which is it just the minister, or is it the civil servants and the senior civil servants behind him? It's the same discussion we were just having, isn't it? Obviously, they're entitled to be away. It's are they, and Biden faced criticism, didn't he, for being at Camp David at the beginning of this. The natural comeback would be they're still doing their jobs, they're still doing what they need to do, but you're contrasting the image of these people on holiday with the images of the staff in Afghanistan who are working in the conditions that none of us can even imagine to try and get people out. Dominic Raab's 5-star resort in Crete looks very different. Couldn't look any more different, could it, to those horrific images of the airports and people in the cities. It's an eternally tricky one, but I think it's given Labour as the opposition a really, really easy win here, and it's a line that's resonating with people, I think, which is, it may not make a difference in terms of Dominic Raab keeping his job and obviously these civil servants, but it is a line that is getting through to people, and people are thinking this is, is it another example of one rule for them and another for the rest of us?
Well, the Dominic Raab story was broken by the Mail today. We've just got in tomorrow's front page with a follow-up to that story. Bad call, Minister is the headline there. And the Mail's story today is that the Foreign Office had said that call to save translators' lives had been delegated to a junior minister, Zach Goldsmith, as we were discussing, Seb. Now they have admitted no one made the call at all.
Yeah, and I think what you're seeing here is not just the position of Mr. Raab, but a systemic failure across Whitehall here. The fact that you've got the permanent secretaries of all the important ministries involved in the Afghanistan operation being away. And yes, you've got deputies, and yes, you have a holiday rota system like any other job. But the fact is, this is one of the biggest moments in British foreign policy in the past couple of years. Everybody knew this day was coming, and the intelligence said that there was a real risk of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan very quickly. Now, not as quickly as it turned out to actually happen, but the fact that people would go away and then still be away in the case of Sir Philip Barton, who's the permanent secretary of the Foreign Office, that just seems unacceptable. And with the Foreign Secretary away as well, you clearly have got a power vacuum. So it's no surprise at all that call didn't take place, because there's not authority from the top. And that's a very crucial thing within Whitehall, whether it's the Secretary of State or the permanent secretary, to get things done, to get things push you. You've got to have that leadership, and fundamentally that just hasn't happened. So I think, as well as the intelligence failings about why we didn't spot the Taliban moving so quickly through Afghanistan, there needs to be a real look at Whitehall here and saying, why were these ministers allowed to go away? Why didn't the call happen? Why did these permanent secretaries go away? In the case of some of them, why are they still on holiday while this disaster is continuing? We are evacuating British personnel, and there's a hope for that is going smoother than it has been over the past 24 hours or so. But we don't know how long the Taliban are going to cooperate with allied troops, and we don't know when America's going to pull out, because that comes back to what we were saying earlier. When America goes, we have to go too. So this whole thing could get more disastrous and more chaotic, and still, is there grip in the centre of government on this? That's the question that I think Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab need to answer tonight.
And Ruth, just briefly, let's bring in the Metro, because I suppose this illustrates incredibly powerfully why this all matters, why the speed of those decisions, why the urgency of getting people out matters so much, with the image of a desperate mother handing her tiny daughter over to soldiers in Kabul in the hope that they will get her daughter out.
Yeah, it's a desperate image, and I'm sure no one can look at it, let alone a parent, and just well up, basically, as I did earlier when I saw it. But I think that the other telling thing is that each paper and each national paper has a different picture, which is mainly children, and they're all in this position. This isn't one horrific or one journalist who's got this, one photojournalist who's got this one particular isolated incident. There are so many kids involved in this, and your footage from your reporter at the scene is tiny babies right through to to older kids, and it's just it's the human element. You know, we can argue about Biden and Johnson and Raab and ministers on leave, you know, and civil servants on leave. But this is the reality of it. There's these, you know, can you imagine being that mother and having to do that in the hope that your kid's going to survive? It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely devastating, and some very harrowing images, as you described. Seb, Ruth, stay with us. We're going to take a short break, but coming up, we're discussing booster jabs for COVID. They could be on the way in the autumn. We'll have more on that in the next couple of minutes. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Sebastian Payne and Ruth Mosalski. We are going to look inside the metro now, Sebastian, for a story about the autumn booster jabs. Now, we heard from the US about their plans last night. Sajid Javid has been talking about this today. Are they going to happen or not?
They are going to start next month as initially planned, because there's been some reports over the past couple of days that actually they might not happen in the UK after all, with them saying the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation would examine were they needed, what immunisation levels were like within the UK. But then Mr. Javid came out today and said, yes, they are going to go ahead, they are going to happen. The thing that I'm most interested in is who's going to get what vaccine, because I've heard from some people in Whitehall that if you got the AstraZeneca jab for your first and second shot, then your booster might be a Pfizer. So there may end up being some mix and matching between the mRNA and the different kinds of vaccines to give optimum protection, because we know the Delta variant has definitely hit the efficacy rates of vaccines. So that is going to be quite important. We still don't know who and what's going to get them, but you'd have to think it's going to be all over 50s. They're going to want to do them as soon as possible before the flu season hits. So if it avoids another lockdown, then I think it's a jolly good thing.
Yeah, indeed. We'll have to wait for more information on that. The initial plan wasn't it, that they would be rolled out alongside the flu vaccinations? We'll see whether or not that happens in time. Ruth, a story on the front of the Telegraph. Does the Welsh language exclude minorities? What's this all about?
So this is a report that was commissioned by two organisations in Wales. That's Art Council Wales and Gaerddfa Cymru, which is the National Museum of Wales. And it was a report commissioned by themselves to look within. While the Telegraph has gone for a line here that that Welsh means white, and it means that the organisations are systematically racist because their requirements exclude people who don't speak Welsh. And when we reported the story today, the way the line we took was different, and that was that the same report has found that both organisations have consistently failed to address endemic racism within their organisations in terms of distributing funds, and that really serious action is needed. The report says that neither are going to be trusted by ethnic minorities until there's a radical change within them, which is quite damning for two very, very big organisations here in Wales.
OK, Ruth and Sebastian, thanks both very much indeed.